Afternoon, folks. So at this point, this is kinda a follow-up to a follow-up of a video about square format film photography. I don't intend to repeat myself in this one. There's just a few things that I would like to add on that I didn't really mention in those previous videos. I'll also show you a few clips and some photos along the way so you don't have to look at my face while I'm blabbering throughout this entire video. Obviously with square format, the most obvious and kind of the most natural thing to do is to center your subject. And that does work really nicely. But you can also 100% use the rule of thirds to frame photos in square format, and I do it all the time. If you always center your subject in the scene, then you often miss out getting a nicer shot with the subject in the wider scene. I think this photo I'm about to show you is a great example of that. I really love this photo and I really like this scene, but the main subject and what drew my attention in the first place was the old Fiat sitting here in the grass. I tried composing from a few different spots, but if I had have centered the car, pretty much all of the rest of the scene on the right would not have been included, which I think would have just made a way less interesting image. Yes, you could just say you could try take two images, which you could, but I wanted to combine all the elements of this scene into what I think at least is a better photo. Using the rule of thirds, the car is on the left line here and the house is on the right, so we include both main elements in a wider scene and it's composed nicely. The grid that I can see on my ground glass really helps me frame things up and balance things in the composition. Also, I always use the vertical lines that you can see in the ground glass to help with leveling my frame. This might be quite obvious, but obviously make sure whatever you're trying to level with is actually level in the scene. You don't want to level your frame with a wonky electric pole, for example, because obviously everything else in the frame will be way off and only the electric pole will actually be straight. Which will mean you will have to adjust that by cropping later, and that may affect your composition. Sometimes the scene that you're trying to photograph will just look best at a certain angle or a certain height. Maybe you're trying to square things up, for example, or maybe include something in the foreground, or maybe try and frame an element in the scene between something else, like an archway or something like that. Now, in a previous video about square format, I did say I didn't really like cropping square shots to something else because it kind of felt a little bit wrong, and to be honest, I normally don't, but with the detail you can get in these negatives, you can 100% shoot with the intention to crop, and I have done it a few times. I've also kind of been forced to crop a little bit because the image just didn't really look great as a square. To sum that up a bit, sometimes things in the frame look best with your camera set up at a certain height or angle, and this might mean you need to crop things a certain way in post to get the best result for that scene. That one's a little bit awkward to explain, but I hope it makes sense. The photo that I showed in there as well is really not a good one. I like that scene, but that's not a great photo of the scene, but hopefully it kind of gets the point across. The detail in those 6x6 negatives is pretty mad. I didn't expect it to be as good when I started shooting film, to be honest, but now that I obviously do know that, I try to make the most out of it. Anyway, the point I'm trying to get at is don't always treat your square format film camera like you would a digital camera, where you might just shoot at f1.8, f2, focus on something in a scene and just snap away. Pay attention to as many elements and details in your frame as you can. Adjust your composition to bring more things into play if you want, because if you shoot at higher apertures like f11 and f16, all those details will play a part in the final shot and they will be really sharp too. When anyone asks, I always recommend to shoot at higher apertures on medium format at like f11, f16, because even at f8, it's so easy to miss critical focus, so just don't run the risk, shoot a higher aperture like f11, f16, and that seems to be where I get the best results too. The sharpest photos with this thing is f11 and f16. I kind of ignored the information on this focus dial for quite a while, but now I use it pretty regularly when I'm lining up a shot and focusing and stuff. Essentially what this dial does is it has a lot of readings on it, and it tells you what the focal range is going to be depending on where you focus or how close you're focusing to the camera. I'm not going to go into serious detail trying to explain the ins and outs of that dial because it gets quite boring, and I don't even know if I could, to be fair, but I'll explain the point that I'm trying to make. I pretty much use it to help speed up the shooting process when it comes to focusing. So if I'm shooting a shot of a scene where I don't really have as much of a foreground, or the closest things in the frame are quite far away, like these shots for example. From making note on previous photos, I know that if I shoot this scene with a little infinity mark on the dial at f8, and then shoot the scene at f11, everything should look pretty nice and sharp. That's really the only marker I use so far, but I do shoot a lot of scenes like that, so I can quickly just flick the focus to that point, and it speeds up the process because focusing on these cameras is not the easiest or the fastest. I kind of touched on something similar to this in one of the previous videos, but really be aware of the edges and the corners of your frame when it comes to square format, because there just isn't a lot of room for getting that wrong and having to crop. Obviously do whatever you want with your shots, but what I would recommend is keep an eye on those edges and corners and have things either all the way in or all the way out of the frame. Don't have things like just kind of peeking in the corner, because it's just going to be distracting. You probably won't really know what it is. It more than likely won't really add to the frame, and what you'll end up doing is having to crop a little bit in post, and that can affect your composition. Like branches slightly hanging into the top corner, maybe a building just kind of in the frame, but not really. You can't really even make out what it is. I would recommend either put it all the way out or have it completely in the frame, include it as an element in the frame, or completely rule it out and just pay attention to the rest of the scene. You often just don't have a lot of room for recropping, and it can essentially ruin your composition. So that's the gist of that point, really. For me at least, I think film photography can be quite relaxing and methodical. The process is just quite nice. It doesn't always have to be slow, but I think particularly with these older 6x6 cameras, I think it just suits a slower pace. Take the time to frame a scene up, and don't be afraid to reframe. Move around and find the composition that works best. There just isn't enough photos on a roll to just waste them. For me, with this camera, the keeper rate for photos is just really high. Like if I'm shooting a roll, I'm normally always happy with a decent few photos in that roll. Whereas if you compare that to digital photography, it could be 100 photos before you get 3 or 4 that you really like. Well, maybe not that high, but definitely better with this camera. And I think that is because I take more time to compose a scene. I'm intentional with what I'm shooting, and I don't want to get it wrong and obviously waste a shot. But I also I feel like I enjoy the process a bit more because I take more time, and I probably walk around a scene a little bit more and try to find the perfect composition, because more than likely I'm only going to take one photo on this thing, but it does normally mean I get a better photo than I would if I was to take 5 or 6 photos on a digital camera. The mindset's just different, but it really works for me. Anyway, I hope there were a few things in there that were helpful to some of you. Like I said at the start, I was trying not to repeat myself in this one and bore you to death. There's just a few sort of newer things that I wanted to add in, and I know some of them maybe slightly overlap, but I was trying my best not to repeat things too much. I will definitely be continuing to shoot on this thing for a long while yet. Just a fun camera. It may be a little bit slow at times, but I think that's part of the enjoyment of it. Just a fun, relaxing, methodical camera to use. Focusing can be a little bit of a faff at times, particularly for portraits, but yeah, I love this thing. Just before I finish, I did mention in the last video that I kind of want to do a photo review video or live stream. I was actually thinking of maybe doing somewhat consistent live streams where the whole point is just featuring photos, chatting about photos that you guys share, stuff like that. So if you would like to be maybe featured in the video or have your photo sort of reviewed, jump in the Discord. The link will be in the description below. I've made a separate channel for photo reviews, so jump in, join the chat, share your photos, and you'll maybe be featured in the video. I think it'll be a fun one. But anyway, hope this one was helpful in some way or other. Maybe give it a thumbs up if it was. Consider subscribing, and as we always say, take it easy, don't be a stranger.